This is the appendix of an autobiography published in 1802. It consists entirely of 11 solid lines of punctuation marks, crammed together without a single word between them. The author included a short note for anyone frustrated by the text that came before it. He told his readers they could take these marks and, quoting here, pepper and salt it as they please. To understand how we get to a point where a writer tells his audience to punctuate his book themselves, you have to look at the man who considered this a perfectly reasonable response to his critics. Timothy Dexter was a largely uneducated tradesman who rose from poverty in 18th century Massachusetts. Despite his lack of formal schooling, he spent his entire life trying to force the high society of the young United States to recognize him as a brilliant philosopher. The elite class spent decades trying to humiliate him. In response, Dexter spent decades successfully ignoring every standard they held for wealth, class, and even the English language. After the Revolutionary War, the wealthy families of New England suggested that Dexter invest his savings in continental currency. At the time, these notes were considered so worthless that the phrase, "not worth a continental," had become a common insult. Dexter bought as much as he could find. But the joke failed when the new government decided to redeem the notes at their original value, instantly turning the local tradesman into one of the richest men in the state. His refined acquaintances tried again, advising him to ship a cargo of bed warmers to the tropical West Indies. They assumed sending long-handled, heat-trapping brass pans to the Caribbean was a certain way to drain his bank account. The cargo arrived, but the pans didn't sit in a warehouse. Instead, the local molasses industry bought every single one of them to use as ladles, making Dexter another fortune. He even shipped a massive load of coal to Newcastle, the town in England that was, at the time, the leading producer of coal. He arrived in the middle of a massive miners' strike, and because there was no coal to be found in the city, he sold his at a premium. Every time the gatekeepers of the economy tried to trick him into bankruptcy, they accidentally handed him a new way to increase his net worth. Money changed Dexter's lifestyle, but it didn't change his reputation. The established families of Newburyport still refused to welcome him into their social circles or respect his intellect. Since he couldn't earn their respect, he decided to demand their attention. He began styling himself as Lord Timothy Dexter, a title he essentially gave himself through sheer repetition. He turned his estate into a public spectacle, installing over 40 life-sized wooden statues of historical figures. He stood George Washington and Thomas Jefferson in his yard, and then put a statue of himself right alongside them. He went as far as hiring a local fish peddler named Jonathan Plummer to serve as his personal poet laureate, paying the man to follow him and sing verses in his praise. Eventually, Dexter faked his own death just to see who would show up to mourn him. 3,000 people attended the mock funeral, but the event ended with Dexter beating his wife with a cane because he felt her tears weren't convincing enough. These displays were meant to force the public to take him seriously as a man of status. But while he could pay for 40 statues and a private poet, his neighbors still saw a man who was playing at a role he didn't understand. When the statues and titles failed to earn him intellectual legitimacy, Dexter pivoted to a new medium. He decided that if he wanted to be remembered as a philosopher, he had to become an author. The result was A Pickle for the Knowing Ones. It was an 8,000-word rant that touched on everything from his personal grievances with his wife to his complaints about the clergy and the government. The book was almost impossible to read. It had no punctuation, erratic spelling, and capital letters dropped into the middle of sentences at random. The critics in the newspapers mocked him, focusing entirely on the atrocious grammar and the incoherent structure of his writing. Dexter's response to the mockery wasn't an apology or an edit. He released a second edition without changing a single word of the original incoherent text. Instead, he added the now famous appendix of periods, commas, and exclamation points. By telling the reader to pepper and salt the book themselves, he shifted the burden of clarity away from himself. If the elite wanted the book to follow their rules, they would have to do the work to fix it. The book went through 8 printings during his lifetime. People weren't buying it for the philosophy. They were buying it because the gesture itself had become more famous than the content. Timothy Dexter spent his life being mocked as a fool by men who believed their rules were absolute. 2 centuries later, those critics are footnotes, while Dexter's bizarre book is still being analyzed as a unique piece of American history.